Today, when the Bible speaks about marriage, it is increasingly speaking about something that many people view as a sort of strange, unencountered, maybe even dangerous phenomenon that is possibly unworkable and definitely very scary. Many people today, if they get married at all, get married much later in life than they used to. Rising costs and difficulty in finding housing and stable jobs leads to people putting off marriage and viewing it and raising children as likely even unattainable. And for those for whom it is attainable, spread out all throughout Hollywood, famous actors and actresses are often getting married and divorcing just as quickly, with some, like the marriage between actor Johnny Depp and actress Amber Heard from 2015 to 2017, whose resulting court case became the subject of a TV documentary series in 2022, even becoming so publicly complicated and destructive in their dissolution that they have become sort of a widespread cautionary tale for both men and women against getting married. Other marriages, like the one between British royal Prince Harry and actress Meghan Markle, which is still ongoing but the subject of a lot of constant analysis and discussion, it has also made the institution of marriage appear unattractive and undesirable to many, specifically men in that case. In the wake of that, alternatives are being offered up everywhere. I was walking downtown with my family this summer, and there were signs propped up in the middle of the street offering apps for casual dating. Kendra and I frequently have to cover up the projector in our living room when we show something on YouTube to our kids because very occasionally there will be an ad from a dating app called Tinder, which advertises casual sexual hookups to a user base, which in Canada, according to the Google search that I did, that app has a user base in Canada of 500,000 people. So it's not the kind of thing that we enjoy our kids seeing when we go to show them old episodes of Bill Nye for their homeschool time. In 2022, the Toronto Star carried an article titled "The Rise of Non-Monogamy." Survey suggests people are more willing to entertain non-traditional relationships. It noted that according to recent surveys, 24% of Americans agreed that a shift towards open relationships would benefit society as a whole, and surprisingly, fully 65% of American women post-pandemic claimed not to believe in monogamy at all. And yet, as society has walked away from a biblical understanding of marriage and then found the non-biblical version to be so bad that they are now fleeing away from it in droves, the answer isn't other human inventions like open relationships or casual dating either. University of Maryland economist Melissa Kearney recently pointed out in her book, which is called The Two-Parent Privilege: How Americans Stopped Getting Married and Started Falling Behind. She says that declining marriage rates in America are driving many of the country's biggest economic problems. And this is not a controversial claim according to the data, but today that claim is considered controversial socially. The celebrated economist Tyler Cowen said of Kearney's book, he said, it's remarkable that such a book is so needed, but it is. University of Virginia sociologist Brad Wilcox also recently published his book promoting the need to return to marriage, which is titled "Get Married: Why Americans Must Defy the Elites, Forge Strong Families, and Save Civilization." What a title. And in that book, he notes that couples who take a we before me approach to getting married, who forge a family-first marriage, accumulate much greater wealth, report much more meaningful lives in their single and childless peers, and that their children do go on to have incredible advantages over those who do not have married parents. Now, I'm going to stop right here and say maybe you are having a tough time hearing this because you're wondering, how can Pastor Sean talk about this? What does he know about the advantages of being married or the difficulties of not being from a two-parent home? Well, Kendra and I got married much younger than most of our friends, certainly my friends, in 2011, which means that this year we celebrate our 14th year of marriage. So we have been married since we were 22 and 20, respectively. I picked her young, and she picked me young. We were both young. When we started out, we rented the smallest and cheapest spaces you could find, and we didn't even own a couch for the first 3 years that we were married. We were both still in school. I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs at a time. Kendra worked different jobs as well. And to get to 14 years of marriage, we have had to really push against a lot of unhelpful messages and standards from both family and friends, which have torn apart many, many other marriages around us. But I also didn't come from a background where this had been shown to me successfully either. My parents divorced so quickly after I was born that when I was 8 months old, my mom left and I have no memories of them together. After that, I had a whole series of common law stepmoms that changed so frequently, I still sometimes have to remember the order of events of my childhood by remembering which woman was my mom during that time. There's Cindy, Mara, Kim, right? And although I turned out okay for the most part, I think I can tell you for sure, there were a lot of disadvantages to overcome. The one advantage that I got out of it was really striving to move forward and learning more about persistence and figuring out things by myself than I probably would have had to otherwise. So what made all the difference? Well, if you are still flipped open to 1 Peter chapter 3, the difference maker is the book that you hold in your hands. It is that book and passages in it like 1 Peter chapter 3 and Ephesians 5, which aren't that popular with many people, and sadly not even that popular in many churches or with many Christians, and it models a different way forward and a different way to live than the rest of our society is currently, and it demonstrates God's goodness to the world around us. See, this book and being in community with people who are committed to living it out, it makes all the difference. So let's get into some of what it tells us, although even today we are just scratching the surface here. So what is the truth that it tells us about marriage? Well, the first truth we notice is in 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. The first word in the ESV that it says is likewise. Likewise, wives, be subject to your own husbands. What does likewise mean? It's a connecting word. If you see a word that says therefore, you should wonder what that word is, therefore. If you see it say likewise, you should say like what? Well, here's what goes on throughout the whole book of 1 Peter before this. This is Peter writing to a group of people who are new Christians, non-Christians. This is the first generation of Christians, and so all of them really are new Christians by definition. And so he's writing to a whole group of them, and he's trying to explain, as someone who followed Jesus around for 3 years, walked with him, talked with him, saw everything that he did, he's trying to explain the gospel. He's trying to explain what the good news is and why it makes such a difference. He's trying to explain how if you believe this and you center your life around this, things will be different. And so he starts off in chapter 1, explaining the living hope that we have, explaining what Jesus has done and how he has offered us such a great salvation. And then he gets into the next little bit of chapter 1, saying, therefore, we should live differently. We should consider that we have a new identity. We should consider that we have a new hope. We would be changed by this. But then he says that hope isn't really just for us. It's also for other people. And so we would live differently. But starting in chapter 2, verse 13, living differently means that we would live a life in front of the rest of the world that would demonstrate the goodness of who God is. And so he goes through this whole list of people that are likely sitting there in the churches that he's writing to, listening to someone read the words that he's written. And he starts talking to people who are, and telling them to be subject to government institutions and to honor the government of the day. He writes to servants, basically employees, telling them to honor their workplaces and honor their bosses. And then he gets towards marriage and he says, likewise, right? That's where that word comes in. Likewise, wives, be subject to your own husbands. Why? Because it's going to be something that models out to the rest of the world something about who God is. The way that we approach marriage, the way that we approach relationships, especially in light of everything that I just told you about what's going on today and now. If we follow this, do you think that it will look different? It will. Do you think that it will get a different result? Absolutely it will. People following their own way and what seems best to them will see the difference in us. If we live this, they will see the difference and say there's something attractive about that. There's something working that isn't working for us. Today, when there's so much information that is being shared, you could make as much of an intellectual case for the gospel as you want to. And I definitely believe that there's a place for that. But ultimately, people have so much information coming to them, they don't know how to sort it all out. And so one of the best ways to get their attention is for them to actually see a difference in your life versus their life and the lives of everyone else that they know. God has given us a blueprint for marriage. He has given us a purpose. And the purpose is even shared in Ephesians chapter 5. So that's the other marriage passage that we could go to. And if I had my tablet connected, it would show up in front of you. But it gives a purpose for marriage, and it says in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25, it says, "As Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, so that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish." This one-way love, this sacrificial, self-giving love, this love that changes by pursuing, this love that changes through care over time. This is Christ's love for his church. And then it says in verses 31 to 32 that this is what marriage is all about. Verse 31, "Therefore, a man shall leave his mother and father and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church." And so what was the term that was used? A we before me marriage, a self-giving marriage, a marriage where I am not at the center trying to get my needs met by another person, but that we are both giving. We are both giving, a giving marriage. It reflects the goodness and the giving of God. It points not to ourselves, but it points as a living message to who God is and what he has done. The purpose of marriage is to image forth, to demonstrate the gospel. Second, we saw that marriage has a purpose. But the other truth is that marriage shows us that although united, we are not the same. The second truth that we get out of this passage is that God made us male and female. Look at the countercultural message in this passage today. So number one, it says that there are two genders, male and female. Likewise, wives, there's women, be subject to your own husbands. Men, there's two, and they're different. Number two, it assumes that they get married to each other. They become husband and wife. Number three, it assumes that that marriage is between one man and one woman. And there's also countercultural things that maybe brush us up the wrong way, like when it talks about roles, or when it talks about submission, or it talks about one person being the head and another person serving, or one person being in the position of being helped, another person being the helper. That's countercultural in our day, and for that reason, this passage today for us would be particularly hard to hear for women. But when Peter wrote it, the people who were having a hard time hearing this were the men. That same passage that might have made some of you feel uncomfortable, the women were nudging him in the ribs and going, "Hey, listen," right? Because of what it says about women. Down in verse 7. It stops and it talks to the husbands and says, "Likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way." Be understanding. Wife would say, "Hey, see, take a look." Showing honor. Oh, the women didn't get honor back then, so this is countercultural. Show honor to the woman as the weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you. NIV will say co-heirs. Now this is amazing, because when Peter wrote this, women didn't inherit anything. They didn't inherit property. They weren't inheritors. So Peter goes ahead and says they are co-heirs with you of the grace of life. And then it also tells these men that they are not the only authority in their own home. So you can picture these guys sitting in the church pews or whatever they had in the first century, sitting around the house, I guess, in the group. And you could picture some of the older, more traditional ones just fuming because someone is saying that no one should be able to tell me what to do in my house or how to treat the people in my house. And here's Peter saying, this is how you treat the people in your house. This is how you treat your wife. He says, if you don't listen to me, if you don't treat her well, then God will not hear your prayers. Wow. So if you're a woman, you're sitting up and you're saying, thank God that this is part of the Bible, so that my husband would view me honorably, so that he would treat me with understanding, so that he would see me as someone with equal dignity and value and worth because I am a co-heir in Christ. Isn't that amazing? This wasn't taught anywhere else during the time that Peter was writing. He wrote it here. One of the reasons that we can trust the scriptures, by the way, is because it doesn't just come from one cultural perspective. It doesn't just reflect, oh, Peter's writing from an older time and that's why he sounds that way. It's difficult to hear then for a certain group of people and difficult to hear now for a certain group of people because it is true and it doesn't come from the wisdom of man. It comes from the wisdom of God. That's why it works. So there's male and female. We see the same in the passage in Ephesians 5. And we actually see this reflected in books that are written by, which I sometimes use in premarital counseling, books that are written by very well-accomplished people. And so here's two of them. I use non-Christian books sometimes because I find that they discover things that are true, but they don't have a framework to put it in. So Luann Brizendine writes these books, the female brain and the male brain. And she's able to see clearly that men and women are different, not just in, some people say in their plumbing, but the brain wiring, in the different hormones that are involved in their how they work. And Luann is no slouch. So here's who she is. She is an American scientist and neuropsychiatrist who is both a researcher and a clinician at University of California, San Francisco. She received a Bachelor of Arts in Neurobiology from UC Berkeley, a medical doctorate from Yale School of Medicine, and she did a 3-year residency at Harvard Medical School. She now serves as the chair of psychiatry for the University of California, San Francisco Medical Center, so she knows her stuff. She said during a TED Talk at UC Berkeley, she said, "My story starts here at Berkeley. I arrived here in the midst of the feminist movement, and we women were not going to take it anymore. We were fed up with men, doing everything. Our brains were just as smart as theirs. There is no gender. The brain is unisex," she says. "Well, then I decided to go into what was then a man's field, medicine. And I started taking classes here in biology and about hormones and the brain. It was very exciting, and I learned very soon that I was wrong. There is no unisex brain. We are different right from our foundations." And so, for example, in the female brain, I have some of these pages bookmarked. We have something called and I'm probably mispronouncing these because she is a neuroscientist, but I'm not. We have something that in the female brain that is called the anterior cingulate cortex, which weighs options and makes decisions. She calls it the worrywart center, and it is larger in women than in men. So what's this going to cause? Always overthinking and wondering about things, and what about this, and what about that, what about this? What if your brain isn't wired that way and you're a partner with someone like that? It'll probably drive you a little bit crazy. But this is part of if you're a man and you're getting this is part of marrying a woman. This is part of the deal, and she's going to help you. In the male brain, we just watched that video about, it's not about the nail and he's always trying to fix things. In the male brain, we have something called the temporal parietal junction, which is the solution seeker. This cognitive empathy brain hub rallies the brain's resources to solve distressing problems while taking into account the perspectives of the other person or people involved. During interpersonal emotional exchanges, it is more active in the male brain. It comes online more quickly and it races forward to a fix-it-fast solution. So are you tired of every time you bring up a problem that your husband says, okay, how can I solve this? Like, let's get this done. Let's fix it. Let's find a solution. And you go, no, I just want to be heard. Well, that's something that he has to learn, but that is part of the deal of you married a man, right? If you want someone to just hear you out and listen, it's going to be harder for him. You might have better luck having a few good female friends, and actually in cases of where someone starts taking hormones that are for men, if they're a woman, in an effort to transition. Luann shares one of these stories of someone who came up to her afterwards. Someone in that situation came up to her and said, when I was living as a woman, I used to really love sharing and talking and sharing our stories and that kind of thing. And she said, once I started going on these hormones, she said, now I don't want to hear any of it anymore. She said, I just thought you should know. Now, that's someone messing against nature with their own biological makeup. That's not something that we promote or want to be part of at all, just to be clear. But God made us differently, and when we introduce things that belong to the other group, we start noticing differences in ourselves. Why? Because we are different foundationally in our neurobiology, in our hormones, everything. We are different people. And so the truth is, God made them male and female. He made us different. We're more alike than we are different, but we are very different. And so this is part of God's good design for us. One of the things that this causes is we have different ways of handling problems and finding solutions. So there's this book called How to Improve Your Marriage Without Talking About It. It's very good. It's very good. And it has this fundamental, I wish I could show you the slide. It has this fundamental insight. As men, we tend to respond to negative information with shame. We internalize it and we direct it towards ourselves. I am the source of the problem. I am wrong. I need to just withdraw and hide. I need to not see anybody. That's how we respond. In women, according to this book, the response tends to be worry and fear. What's going to happen? Are we going to be safe? Are we going to have enough food? Is anyone going to come in? What about this? What about this? What about this? Remember the worrywart center that I told you about just a little bit ago, and that's hyperactive. Well, what happens is when the man experiences shame, he hides. He goes to the garage, he goes to the den, he doesn't want to see anybody, and he doesn't want to share. That response then triggers fear in the wife. Oh, he's withdrawing, he's not talking to me, I don't know if he loves me, I don't know if our relationship is secure, I don't know if we're okay. The way that she acts out that trigger, or that she responds to that trigger, is typically, not in every case, but typically through talking, through naming it, and possibly even accusing. Hey, you're away, you're not listening to me, we're not having enough time, we're not doing this, how does the man receive it? As shame. What does the man do when he's shamed? He hides. What happens when he hides? The wife experiences fear. What happens when the wife experiences fear? She names it. What happens when she names it? He feels shame. How do you get out of this cycle? Okay? If you take that problem, now this is a book by a non-Christian author. The solution is in here. Because what happens is Ephesians 5 will call the man to a one-sided response of love. So he experiences shame, and out of that shame, instead of hiding away, he loves as Christ loved the church. Did Christ wait for the church to come to him and do everything right before he loved her? No. The man is told to love his wife as Christ loved the church, and so he has a one-sided response of love. What happens then? Well, then instead of transmitting hiding, his wife feels secure. She feels engaged with, she feels loved. Then her response isn't naming and accusing, but it's peace. And that's how you break the cycle. What happens if the woman, following 1 Peter 3, has a one-sided response of respect and honor? What it tells the man is, I'm sticking with you. You have dignity. I support you. I'm here for you. You might not get everything right, but I'm right behind you. It tells the woman even to call her husband Lord, which today that would be like calling your husband Sir. My wife calls me Sir sometimes. It's kind of fun. I don't know, maybe she got it from this book. But what does it communicate to the man? In the midst of all the things that he knows he's messing up or doing wrong, it instills dignity. And wow, if she really believes me and she's going to follow me, if she's going to listen to me, and I'm really responsible and I'm really the head of this marriage, then I really need to pull it up. And so instead of responding out of hiding, he responds with engagement. What happens when he responds with engagement? His wife feels safe. It breaks the cycle. So it just says what is. It talks about the difference between men and women and how we respond differently. It doesn't even have a definition of gender to work those insights into. But the Bible does. And the Bible then has the solution to the exact problem that they name scientifically. Isn't that interesting? I love it. So this thing that is controversial even to talk about in the church, this passage isn't often read. You don't hear it studied a lot. This thing is the solution to the major relational and family problems facing our culture in this moment right now. If we are going to offer any hope to the world around us, if we are going to chart forward a better way, if we are going to model a different path and show forth the wisdom of God, we need to engage with this highly controversial thing that starts off with, likewise, wives, be subject to your own husbands, because it is good news. And it shows a solution that isn't available anywhere else. Okay, number 3, it also, the first part of this passage, verses 1-6, speaks to women. I'm going to go very quickly here. It speaks to women, and so it speaks to them according to their worth, that they are co-heirs at a time when they couldn't inherit anything, that beauty is not a matter of the clothes that you wear or of your physical appearance, but that God looks upon the heart, and that's the thing that matters the most to marriage and a relationship with your own husband, that beauty is not a physical adorning, but it is a character, a certain character and a certain spirit. And then it talks about confidence. It says, do not fear that which is frightening. Remember the Worry Wart Center? There's lots of things that seem frightening, lots of little worries, and they are frightening and they are legitimate. And he says, do not fear anything that is frightening. What does he say in that moment? That there are things that are frightening, but that women are capable of courage. Do not fear anything that is frightening. Stick in there, hold on to your faith, move forward. You've got this. Do not fear anything that is frightening. So there is worth and there is beauty and there is confidence. And there's also limitations in that day. Husband is not complete lord over her conscience, but she now has another authority, which is Christ. And so if something is asked of her that is immoral, she can say no because Jesus is her Lord. If something is asked that is harmful to her or her children, she can say no because that's not what Jesus would ask me to do. But yet, in all things, having a respectful and a quiet and a gentle and a confident demeanor, she is able to win over, even it says a husband who is not following Christ. It says, even if some do not obey the word, they may be won without a word by the conduct of their wives. Through this faithfulness, a husband can be won over. Kendra actually recommends a resource often to other people. It's a book that has been helpful to her. It's changed our marriage. I've never read it. All I know is whatever she's doing, it works. It's called The Empowered Wife by Laura Doyle. And And it starts off with a blurb that says, Laura Doyle's marriage was in trouble and couples counseling wasn't helping. And on the brink of divorce, she decided to talk to women who'd been happily married for over a decade. And their advice stunned her. And from it, she distilled 6 intimacy skills, woman-centric practices, which means the woman isn't waiting around for her husband to do something. She can get this started right away. So 6 woman-centered practices that ended her overwhelm and resentment, restoring the playfulness and passion in her marriage. And so these 6 steps are self-care, having your own ability to be like, I'm fine. I don't need my husband to make me feel okay. I'm okay on my own. In fact, there's a quote by an author named Tim Keller. This is a Christian book I do recommend. And he says, in chapter 2 of this book, he says, the picture of marriage given here is not of 2 needy people unsure of their own value and purpose, finding their significance and meaning in one another's arms. If you add 2 vacuums to each other, you only get a bigger and stronger vacuum, a giant sucking sound. Rather, Paul assumes that each spouse already has settled the big questions of life, why they were made by God and who they are in Christ. No one lives a life of continual joy in God, of course. It is not automatic and constant. If that were the case, Paul would not have had to start verse 18 with an imperative, exhorting them literally to go on being filled with the Spirit. He says we are often running on fumes spiritually, but we must know where the fuel station is, and even more important, that it exists. After trying all kinds of other things, Christians have learned that the worship of God with the whole heart, in the assurance of his love, through the work of Jesus Christ, is the thing that their souls were meant to run on. That is what gets all the heart cylinders to fire. If this is not understood, then we will not have the resources to be good spouses. If we look to our spouses to fill up our tanks in a way that only God can do, we are demanding an impossibility. And so the first step for that reason is self-care, or learning where to fill up your own tank, to go to God and have your own quiet times in prayer, your own reflection times, to go and fuel up your relationship with God. So number 1, self-care. Number 2, restore respect for your husband. Number 3, relinquish control of your man. Number 4, receive gifts and good. Number 5, reveal your heart with vulnerability. And number 6, refocus your view with gratitude. All of these things reflect things that are named in 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 1 to 6. And then finally, for husbands, how does this address us? Well, I already named a couple of things that it calls us to understand and to honor and to care. And to view your wife as an equal, as someone who is your partner, who is your co-heir in life, and to approach God together. To remember that God will hold you accountable for your treatment of your own wife. It's something that I consider all the time, and I'll make a mistake and then come back and say I'm sorry, right? Ultimately, I'm accountable to God for whether I'm a good husband, a good father. He holds me accountable to that. And so I'm not the unquestioned master of my own home. But I am called to be an understanding and loving husband who doesn't always get it right, but comes under Jesus to try and love my wife with something approaching an impression of the way in which God has shown love for me. From the context, over this passage, take a look at how Peter really quickly makes sure to include husbands. So he does say, starting in chapter 2, verse 13, be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution. He doesn't then go on to have a word to the governors. Number 18, he says, servants, be subject to your masters with respect. He doesn't go on to have a special word for masters. But then he gets to wives in chapter 3, verse 1. And after he's done talking to them, he takes a special moment to speak to the husbands because he knows the husbands are there. He wants them to know, look, everything that I just said, don't think that you've got everything under control and you can take care of everything right now. You have someone that you answer to too. And so you need to understand that your wife is worth just as much value and dignity as you have. And if you don't understand that, then God won't hear you when you pray. And so there is a diversion. There's a specific aside that Peter takes because he's speaking to us. And what he wants, I think what God wants, is marriages that are healthy. Women who respect their husbands. Husbands who respect and love and care for their wives. He wants marriages that show out to the world the goodness and the glory of God. Because ultimately, marriage is not about each of us getting our own needs filled. It is about Jesus. It is about his grace. It is about his pursuit, even when we weren't pursuing him. It is about a one-sided response of love. It is about what Jesus does that we can only ever imitate. It is this picture that if we attempt it, if we try to live it out, with God's Spirit helping us all along the way, other people will look at and see there's something different about that, because only the gospel could accomplish this correctly. We will not always get it right. We will make lots of mistakes. But along the way, we will show the world around us, if we live this out, we will show the world around us a little bit of who God is. Amen?